I would like to invite Mr. Ayaz Ameer. He is the journalist and member of National Assembly.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, this unfortunate trend has grown where journalists in different places in Pakistan are the objects of violence. And this has to do with the peculiar conditions prevailing in Pakistan. The most endangered, the places which hold out the greatest threat to journalists are two. One is the frontier province, especially the FATA part of it. The other is Karachi. And there are two forms of terrorism which obtain in both these places. There is religion-inspired terrorism in FATA, and there is, surprisingly, a secular form of violence in Karachi. In FATA, if you break the trend, FATA is dominated by, which we don't like to admit, but it is dominated by Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. And one of the effects of the American invasion was that this area has, for all intents and purposes, there is a nominal presence of the Pakistani state, but it has really gone into other hands. And anyone breaking the mold, stepping out of line, faces mortal danger in FATA. There are many local journalists who have found it impossible to stay there, and they have come out of FATA and settled in other parts of the frontier. The other form of terrorism or the fear of violence is in Karachi, and which I just described as secular violence or secular terrorism. There have been martial law regimes in Pakistan which have suppressed the press, which imposed censorship, which held out penalties for journalists who were going about the business of reporting or delivering their opinions. But the kind of fear that developed in Karachi after 1990 and which still holds true was not even practiced. That kind of systematic fear, even martial law regimes would envy that kind of control which secular terrorism or violence has in Karachi. In 1990 and 91, the situation was such that if a press statement from a particular organization was faxed to newspapers, they were under the obligation, they were under the compulsion of not only printing those statements without changing a comma or a full stop, but of also giving prominent place to those press releases. So much so that even newspapers, English language newspapers, which pride themselves on their independence, they also had to follow this line. The situation has somewhat eased in Karachi because the kind of political dominance that we saw over there, that has been fractured a bit. And now there's not just one player using violence in Karachi, but there are several. And this has led to a new kind of balance, but the lives of journalists who again step out of line, who are a bit either critical or outspoken, they face threats in Karachi. There is the example of Ali Khan Babar. There is the example of television news channels and newspapers. You would see that many of the news channels have honed a special talent for parody, for parodying politicians. But when it comes to certain politicians, they hold their peace and say nothing at all. That is the kind of situation which obtains over there. And this reflects, I think, a larger reality. the kind of Pakistan, I think, which people of my generation visualized, which people of my generation thought that Pakistan should be like this, we have not really been able to create it, and things have become bad in many, many respects. We have made this into a restrictive society. The kind of freedom that is taken for granted, the kind of social freedoms that are taken for granted in most other countries which call themselves civilized or democratic, we don't have them here. And over the years, the failure of politics, the failures on the political front have really meant greater social restrictions. This is a challenge for society at large. This is a challenge for all political parties, but this is a challenge which political parties somehow fail to face up to, and they fail to address. This is true of the People's Party. I think this is also true of my party. The fights which go on in the political arena are about different things. But the basic problems afflicting Pakistan, the things which have contributed to the decline or the deterioration of the kind of society that many of us would like to see developing in Pakistan, political parties are not addressing that. We had a wonderful opportunity in the life of this National Assembly when the 18th Amendment was being put together. But I think we blew that chance. And from all parties which were represented in that committee, they went about dealing with arcane and extraneous issues and not addressing the kind of deterioration that had really happened during the Ziaul Haq era. This was an opportunity when Parliament could have got together and done away with in one sweep. They could have done away with many of those restrictive social laws or legislations, but I think the realization that should have been there in the National Assembly, that was not there. And when the 18th Amendment was really came before the House, it almost was like a surprise being sprung upon the House, and it hadn't even been discussed in the political parties. In the Commission, of course, in the special committee, of course, but not within the political parties. So there is a need, I think, for political parties, political activists, people in society to think about these things as to why all this has happened, as to why things are deteriorating, why there is greater intolerance and bigotry in Pakistan, why when we can't address concrete issues on which our minds should be focused, we raise the banner and talk about completely different things. The championing of, it's very surprising, it's very bizarre, the championing of killers, the glorification attached to people who've committed heinous crimes, and you understand the reference to what I'm making the reference. These are things which show the rise of bigotry, the march of intolerance, and I think besides looking at the dangers posed to, and I think it also touches upon press freedom. These issues should also be discussed in the press, in the media. We have a powerful media now, but it somehow skirts around these issues, and the kind of honest, critical debate that should be occurring in the media, talking about these things, you just can't talk about them. And things have reached such a pass, they've come to such a pass, that, for example, the killing of Salman Taseer, talking about it in an open way, discussing this side of the issue or that side of the issue, um, has become very, very difficult. And television channels will talk about everything. They will touch the surface of things. They will touch the superficiality of events, but they will not really come to grips with these issues. The media, and this is a problem facing the media, it has led to the superficialization of debate in Pakistan. The kind of these are serious issues facing our country, but the kind of discussion, the kind of narrative, the kind of debate that should be taking place, I think the media is failing on that front. So apart from the threats to journalists, the media also should look into itself, look into its conduct and its performance. There is a need for political parties to improve themselves. There's a need for the media to improve itself. Thank you very much.